And it says, don't get suckered by duties that rhyme, logos that look good, images that sell. Forget all the hype. Get into training to be more like God. You work out in the gym, great, as far as it goes. But training in God's gym goes all the way. It qualifies you for this life. It qualifies you for the next life. The next several weeks, and we could probably go 4 years talking about this sermon series that we're going to do. And I'm going to hit the spiritual disciplines. And we're going to take a look at things that kind of go along with what I spoke about last week. This godliness that we seek. This sanctification of our life. This purifying of our life. If we look at the relationship between Paul and Timothy, we see a couple different things. The biggest thing that I notice out of this text, and applying this to spiritual disciplines, is Paul seeks out Timothy. And in Paul's life, the way he's living, he is teaching Timothy. We're going to do a kind of a pericope of this text that I just read. 1 Timothy 4. A pericope is just a cut around the text. And we're going to go back a couple verses to the beginning of the chapter. See, Paul is giving some insights here to Timothy. And I want us to notice some things that he's talking about here when he's speaking to Timothy. At the beginning of chapter 4, the Bible says, the Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. He tells that the focus of people will change, that people will start to pursue different things, invest their lives in other things, that God will not become the focus of their lives, and their pursuit of righteousness will stop. See, the question in my mind when I read this was, if they start doing other things, how are they directed to do these other things? Because it tells us we will take our attention off of God and we will put our attention onto other things in our lives. The next verse says clearly, such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared with a hot iron. See, basically, Paul is saying here, people with an agenda other than God's agenda will plant it in our brains that we need to be doing something else. That we need to be focusing on this other stuff. When in reality, Paul is teaching Timothy, when he's with him, what you need to do is seek God's face. And everything you do, you need to seek God's face. All of this other stuff will come. It bothers me when I go into churches and I hear sermons that only talk about, here is what God commands us. Here's what you have to do. God desires something way more than that. How do these people convince other people? The next verse tells us, they forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. See what people do? They stand up in front of people and they make you feel bad about your life. They make you feel that all this stuff that you're doing is not good stuff, and it's not good stuff. But their focus shouldn't be there. See, God requires obedience, and He desires us to live respectable lives, but He craves something else. See, God desires a relationship. I am in no way, shape, or form standing up here telling you that obeying commands are not good, because they are. We're commanded to do that. We're to obey God. But here's the thing. If we focus our entire life on all of the things that we should not be doing, how in the world do we have time focusing on the place we need to go and where we need to be? See, people learn by watching. It doesn't matter if you're a child or if you're 109 years old. People learn from example. The people you look up to, the people you are around, they will shape your life. In every leadership course that I took, in all the conferences I attend, one thing always comes up. Leaders shape congregations. That always comes up. And the saying is, as the leadership goes, so goes the church. If we would take a field trip and go to some growing churches, my bet is you will find some spiritual men and spiritual women of influence leading those churches. But do you know what you will also find? You will find spiritual men and women in the congregation. If we would take a field trip to the opposite, and we would find a church that is not headed in the right direction, you would find men and women of influence that were not spiritual people. And you would see a congregation that was full of nothing more than Sunday morning attenders. Last week we had an opportunity to go down in the fellowship hall and talk with people. And I remember one conversation, don't remember this conversation we had. We were down there, we were eating our hot dogs and those little sausage things that I think someone told me that had like grape jelly or something in it. And which was weird to me, but I was like the best ever. And cookies and whatnot. And we were down there just talking, hanging out. And for some reason, the conversation of disciplining kids came up. And I have that conversation with everybody. And it always comes up. And I always sit quietly. Because my wife and I, we don't spank our children. We go different routes. But what are we trying to do when we discipline our children? We are trying to create people that we think would be great members of society. How we think they should behave. That's what we're trying to do when we discipline kids. Even if we do exactly what they do, we always like to either, redirect them with words or swat them on the behind or something to redirect them to where they should be going. Our objective is to take the child and create them into people we want them to be. In a sense, we want them to be mirror images of us.